Let me also say, for those who don't know me, the most crucial element of my biography is that I consider myself a son of this country, because I was almost born here. I was almost born just minutes from here. Our family legend is that I was supposed to be born in Sharjah, actually. And my mother was not supposed to travel at the stage of pregnancy that she was at. It was 8 months already on. And yet Air India let her fly to India against the suggestions of doctors, because she really wanted me to be born in India. But already my family lived here, and my family lived here for quite some time. My family lived in Khartoum in Sudan. They had lived in Cairo. They had lived in Beirut. My parents were traveling all over the region, and this became our home, actually. So I spent my childhood in Abu Dhabi, actually, on Sheikh Hamdan Street until I was 7 years old. So I've always considered myself to be someone who considers this country home, and everyone such as yourselves has always made me feel very at home here in the UAE. I have been so proud, especially in the last 15 or 20 years, that I have been repeatedly coming back and getting more involved with the government, with the intellectual community, the academic community, to see how this country has developed, modernized, and grown. So let me say a few words about that, because, of course, I think everyone is even more proud here in this room than I am of what this country has accomplished in becoming a federation and growing together. But I want to put a bit of not a theory, but a message and a lesson behind it that I think is extraordinarily important. And it is the principle that drives, we think of it as something that is invisible. The younger a person is, when you say the word connectivity to them, the more invisible the idea of connectivity is, because they think it's just their mobile phone and there's no wires anymore. They have no idea what a phone is that's connected to a wall. But connectivity is actually a very physical thing. All connectivity rests on infrastructure. And infrastructure falls into various categories. Historically, the evolution of our infrastructure begins with transportation systems. Think about roads, railways, high gas, electricity grids. All of these are 20th century inventions. And then, of course, communications systems. We've had telegraph cables since the 19th century. Now we have internet cables that follow some of the same routes. We have satellites, of course, circling the Earth. Those are all physical infrastructures. In economics, we call it fixed capital formation. And there is a very strong correlation between the degree of stability in a country, the economic growth of the country over time, the lower inequality in a country, all of the good things, all of the very positive metrics by which we can measure a country's quality of life for its citizens and so forth, have a correlation to the quality and the volume of the infrastructure. And infrastructures exist to connect us, whether it is the transportation systems, the energy systems, or the communication systems. Now, of course, this is a country, this is a region that historically has not had as high quality in infrastructure as the city of Dubai does today. So the story of a country's rise up the value chain, its significance in the world, its visibility, its reputation, is the story of the increasing quality and the degree of its connectivity. This is extremely important, because we think of power and reputation in the world as being derived from things like military assets and so forth, and just raw economic size, or of course demographic size. Right? But there are many countries that have far more people than the UAE, but are not as significant as the UAE. Right? So the difference between an important country and an unimportant country is not necessarily the size of its military or the number of people that it has, but its degree of connectivity to the world. And that is something that is not the way And even today, most people, most scholars even do not understand this new measurement, this new approach to understanding how we are all relating to each other as societies. But there's a very good example that we can draw upon. Many of you know the story that that His Excellency Mr. Muhammad Alabar spent some years in the 1970s and 1980s in Singapore. And he traveled there. He began to understand, of course, the system of the ports, of course, the infrastructure and so forth. And it's part of the history of Dubai to have learned from the Singapore experience. Singapore is now a city of about 5 million people. It's grown very rapidly. It was only 15 years ago the same population size as Dubai today. But it's interesting that I got a phone call 2 days ago from a journalist from the Straits Times. The Straits Times is Singapore's main newspaper of record, and this journalist is the lead foreign policy or global sort of editor. And he said, I'm writing a story about the Far East, Middle East connection. We decided that we would stop calling this the Middle East, by the way. We decided we would call it West Asia and get beyond the post-colonial geographic terminology. He said, I'm writing an article about this connection. Tell me, what can Singapore learn from Dubai? And I thought, what a wonderful reversal. Because for 30 or 40 years, it's been, what can Dubai learn from Singapore? And we're starting to see this happen. And again, what has made the difference? Right? It's obviously the ambition that everyone has come to admire about Dubai and the UAE as a whole. But so much of it has to do with the degree of connectivity. One of the points that I make in my work is that the geography of a place does not change. Dubai has not picked up and moved from one place to another. Dubai used to be the place that people flew over, and now it is the place where people come and stop, and they settle and they live. What has changed is not the geography, but the degree of connectivity. And Singapore is still one of the 3 or 4 most connected countries in the world. But as of just 2 years ago, Dubai entered the ranks of the most connected cities in the entire world. And it takes a lot of investment in connectivity to reach that status. What we measure is the extent to which a city is a conduit for the flows worldwide of goods, transshipment of goods, of people coming through, business travelers, tourists, and so forth, finance, the amount of capital exchanged through the markets or trade finance or lending, data flows, telecommunications, and so forth, and various other categories. And so this is a fairly objective set of rankings. Now, we have 60,000 years of human history. We have a world that is mostly urbanized. And this list, and we have a world of nearly 8 billion people spread across all the continents. And for all of this history, all of this investment, all of the scale and the power of so many countries in the world, there are only, according to these objective measurements, only 6 global cities. Only 6 cities that are the absolute top tier in the world of being the conduit for the flows of goods, people, services, capital, data, and so forth. It starts with New York and London, and it took hundreds and hundreds of years for London to become London, for New York to become New York. Then came Tokyo, then came Hong Kong, then came Singapore. So there were just 5 cities. So all of history comes down to 5 cities that are truly the magnetic global hubs. And 2 years ago, according to DHL, according to McKinsey, according to these researchers, Dubai made the list. And that's why Dubai has, to me, achieved a status that is truly, objectively on par with the great cities in the world. But it did it in much, much less time. It invested in that connectivity so much faster. Technology makes it possible. The lessons of history, the lessons from other countries makes it possible. And the circumstances have been right for this country and for Dubai. But that status can also be lost. So in the most recent edition of this research, the one city has fallen off the list, and that's Tokyo. Tokyo is no longer considered one of the top 6 cities in the world for the flows across all of these categories. Another city has come on the list, Los Angeles. And it's not necessarily a competition. They didn't have to remove Tokyo. Tokyo removed itself. Right? Tokyo has become less connected. Right? It's a function of economic stagnation, quite a few other variables. The beautiful thing, though, about a world where major cities are striving to become global cities, are now looking to Dubai in the way that even Singapore is looking and saying, what can we learn from Dubai? Imagine what all of the other cities in the Arab world, cities in Africa, cities across in India, across the post-colonial world are looking at Dubai, and they're saying, we want to do that too. The difference is that in a world where the mentality of nationality, the mentality of sovereignty, the mentality of territoriality dominates, the rise of another is viewed as a threat to oneself. In a world of cities, it's the opposite. Cities look at other cities and they see opportunity. They don't see risk. So, for example, the rise of Sao Paulo as a financial center, a business center in South America, is not a risk to Dubai. It's a destination for Emirates Airlines to fly to. Right? City hubs of the world will be, in the year 2030, on the basis of demographic size, economic weight, infrastructural investment, share of trade, their role as gateways for capital, trade in and out of continents. There will be about 40 major cities in the world in the year 2030. They won't all be global cities in the tier of where Dubai is and London is, but about 40. And those cities are the 40 cities, or the 39 other cities, that are going to be Dubai's allies, Dubai's partners in the world. And you can already look at a map today and see exactly what they are. And those are the cities that are going to be learning from Dubai. Dubai is going to be learning from them. You'll be trading more with them. You'll be traveling there. And that is how you become a civilization, a human civilization that is a network of connected cities. It is an entirely different way of understanding how we organize ourselves, how our system in the world is organized. We have been grown up thinking that it's all about nations and boundaries. Instead, it's about cities and their infrastructural linkages. And no country can survive without having a city, a thriving hub that is connected to other cities. No country can survive without importing food, fuel, water, without trading with others for goods. And so a city and a small and well-organized country is going to be better off in this world than a large country that doesn't manage its resources well, that cannot provide for its population, that doesn't have the financial or fiscal resources to invest. So whereas it used to be that big and powerful and populous is better, today, smaller, nimble, concentrated, connected is better. It's a very, very big shift in what constitutes success in our framework for looking at the world. So I actually want to just draw it to a close right there in terms of opening remarks. I just want to provide some provocations. I want to share some of the elements from the research that I do that I think is relevant. I think that Dubai is doing so much right. I think the UAE is doing so much right. I know that there's challenges. I know that there's growing pains. All of us in this room, I commend all of you for your hard work in being here. Actually, when Bailey came in, she said I work for the Dubai Future Foundation. I said, I was thinking, my immediate response was actually everyone here works for the Dubai Future Foundation in some way, because this city is an experiment, right? We know that it's the most diverse now city in the world. There are so many things happening here that from which you almost cannot learn from other places anymore. You have to be very confident in experimenting, because there are almost no role models left to look to when you've achieved already in just such a short time what this city and what this country has achieved. So that is why it's, for me, I have such pride coming back here. so regularly 35 years after we moved away, and I will certainly continue to for the rest of my life. And I'm again very, very grateful to take this opportunity to be with you this evening. And by all means, please let us have in proper Majlis tradition and open conversation and discussion. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.